Rabbi David Stav, thank you very much for joining me today on the Orthodox Conundrum podcast.
Good morning. Good morning to you and to the audience.
Harav Stav, many people in the Dati Leumi, the national religious world, and the modern Orthodox world, they identify strongly with Orthodoxy. They identify strongly with the community in general, but there seems to be an alienation, a feeling of distance from Halacha, from Jewish law. In your view, what is driving this disconnection?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we could easily say, as we used to say, our mashgichim and our rabbeim used to say when we were young, that this generation is not different than any other generation in the past, and there is what we call yetzer hara, the devil, the whatever we would define it, the Yetzirah, which is expressing itself in desire, in ta'avot, to do bad things, and therefore it's an ancient Yetzirah. It's not something new, and every generation it dresses himself in different or presents himself in different coverings, and it hides himself under different words, but basically it's the same Yetzirah that human being want to see, and nothing has been changed since Adam and Eve and until now, which is basically true. I mean, first of all, we do not ignore and we do not deny the existence of Yetzer Hara that appears in each one of us in different ways and is a challenge for every human being by being a human being. And that's not different if it's Dati Leumi or Haredi or secular or whatever, or a Gentile. Each one of us has a Yetzer Hara. That could not be denied and we should not ignore. But yet, to say that the reason why the Dati Leumi people are not that strict and different in observing or in practicing certain halachot, it would be too easy to solve this problem just by saying Yetzer Hara. Why am I saying that? I'm saying this because when we see these people, and especially after 2 years of war, we see their mesirut nefesh, their readiness to sacrifice themselves in the battlefields. Now, it's not one day of sacrifice, which you say, okay, they arrived to a moment where maybe most of the people that would arrive to that moment would have done this, would have acted the same way. We're talking about people that already almost 2 years do not go to work, 400 and 500 days of reserves. We're talking about their families, their wives, their parents, their kids. We see that these people are not people that look for convenient life. They're not just people that want to have a good time and to enjoy their lives. They're people that are very idealistic and people that are ready to sacrifice a lot, not only to die, but on a daily basis to go to reserves. Today in Israel, it's more than 40 degrees Celsius. It's more than 100
Degrees.
degrees Fahrenheit. For those who need to translate to Fahrenheit, it's more than 104, 105 Fahrenheit. And people are now in Gaza, are talking about tens of thousands of people that could easily go home and saying, well, they're sick, they are old, they're this, they're that. And under such terrible conditions, they serve and they don't say a word. But yet, when it comes to different halachot, they do not show the same mesirut nefesh, the same sacrifice that they show to halacha. So just to say, well, that's Yetzirah, it's a big Yetzirah to stay at home with the air condition rather than to go to Miluim. So we must look for something which will give or will provide us with a different tool in order to understand what is the psychology or what is the perception of the modern Orthodox in this generation.
Okay, that's an important point. And certainly we see that when it comes to the young generation, they have become heroes. People until 2 years ago had often thought that, oy vavoy lanu, this new generation, they have no sense of mesirut nefesh, no sense of dedication. And we've thankfully, Baruch Hashem, been proven completely wrong. They've demonstrated mesirut nefesh to an unbelievable degree. And yet, very often, particularly in the modern Orthodox Dati Lumi world, that often does not translate into both halachic observance and a desire to even care about learning halacha. I'm not saying they're not Shomrei Shabbat. That's not what I mean. It does seem, however, that they're more relaxed about many aspects of halacha than I don't want to say people were in the past, but then maybe we would expect from a Torah community. So, what do you think is driving that disconnection, Rav Stav?
Right. I think that's the issue that should be discussed. And I think it's a challenge to us as rabbis. It's a challenge for Torah, and it's a challenge for us as people, as observant people. I think that the average modern Orthodox guy, when he goes to the army or when he goes to university, when he comes with different kinds of interaction with secular people, he will many times say to himself, well, I have no doubts about the fact that Torah was given in Sinai. I have no questions about the question whether God exists or does not exist. But I have a big doubt whether the observing, practicing the details of mitzvot will bring me to one of the two required resolutions or achievements that we expect from religion. A, to make me a better person. B, to make me a happy person. These are two challenges. And I would like to start from the first one, from being a better person. We will see in the army, we will see in university, and the modern Orthodox people will meet a lot of secular people that are also in the best elite units in the army, that are working in high tech, in other financial issues in the universities and other places, and they will ask themselves: are we, as a result of being Shomer Shabbos and Shomer Kashrut and practicing davening, etc., does this make us better people than the secular? And I'm not sure that the answer they give to themselves is no doubt. Of course, yes. Do they see that religious people are necessarily people that are more moral, more volunteering, more everything in the moral area? That's one issue that bothers and concerns a lot of people. I dare to say that I've never seen, or almost never seen. I don't want to say I've never, because never is not accurate. I've almost never seen a boy or girl that were alumni of our education system that started to be less frum, less observant, because they discovered the Torah was not given in Sinai. I've never seen somebody that has come to the conclusion that God does not exist. But I've seen a lot of people that ask me, what makes you so sure that the fact that you are obligated to Torah will make you and your family more moral than others? And that's a challenge that we have to respond.
If I could just add one point, I think, and I'm not even judging this, but I think from the mindset of many people in the Dati Lumi world who give such dedication to the army, part of the problem might be, if I can add, that they look at the people who are ostensibly the most dedicated to being Shomer Mitzvot, people in the Haredi community, and their refusal to serve in the army, and that's not our topic today. It makes people feel, how can the people who are the most connected to Torah by their own definition also do something which we think is really unethical? And that can only contribute to the sense of, well, if Halacha doesn't let you have that sense of dedication to Am Yisrael the way we see it, it probably adds to the sense of, why am I doing that in the first place?
You're absolutely right. But I would like, since it's such a big topic, the issue of the draft of the Haredim, it adds. You're absolutely right. But if that interview or that discussion would have taken place 2 years ago, I would say the same words without any connection to October 7th. And if this discussion would have taken place in the states where the draft of the Haredim does not make such a big difference there, I would respond in the same way.
Okay.
So the states has its own stories. I don't have to tell you the stories of those who cheat to the government to the federal government administration regarding numbers of students and study accepting money from the state where they do not deserve to, etc., etc. It's true, but this
It's
is
not a new
all.
phenomenon.
It's an addition. Uh, the situation is bad enough without that. But you're absolutely right. Add to that each one of us, especially as youngsters, we have to realize something that Rabbi Sachs was saying this in different ways, and he's so right. People refuse to realize how right he was, especially in Israel. People think that if somebody is educated in a religious education today, well, most probably will continue just like his parents. He will follow his parents. That's based on the assumption that most people want to please the parents and want to follow their ways, which is basically true. But we have forgotten one thing. We live in a generation of freedom of choice. And as Rabbi Sachs loved to say, we shifted from being the chosen people to be the choosing people. The choosing people means that each one of us wants to have the feeling that we choose. And when we choose to be observant, we will do that not because of respecting and honoring our parents, not because of the Mesirut Nefesh of Akedat Yitzchak, of the Holocaust. We have to be convinced that this is the right decision for us, and we will take the decision based on our own interest, not Yetzirah, but by understanding what will make us more happy and what could cause us more sorrow and more sadness. And that's the basic reason for deciding or for accepting any decision. And people are not convinced, especially among the modern Orthodox, they are not convinced that being strict in the halachic details makes them more happy, makes them more lucky. And I would like to share with you an anecdote.
Please.
I was doing a siyum maybe 20 years ago on Masechet Brachot in the Sephardic community in Shoham. And they invited, to honor that event, they invited a very Kabbalistic rabbi, very famous Kabbalistic rabbi from Bnei Brak. His name was Rav Nissim Peretz, blessed his memory. He was really a big scholar and a Mekubal. And I gave a drosha, I gave a sermon after finishing the Masechet. And he took an apple and he said, Rav Stav, and in front of the entire community, he said, look, if we eat this apple after we finished Masechet Brachot, and we make a bracha borei pri ha'etz, and then afterwards borei nefashot, and we don't feel that this apple is tastier, it means that we didn't understand nothing. If the apple is not more juicy for us, that means that we haven't understood nothing. And then I realized that what this rabbi expects us is maybe touching the point that most of our youngsters are debating with or are questioning, is the fact that we will make bracha before we eat, which is one of the challenges of our youngsters. They quite often intend to forget. Will this bracha make our life more meaningful? Will it make the taste of the apple or the sandwich different? And the argument should be, yes, it should make us different. But we have to be convinced that that's the case. Yeah, you wanted to say something.
No, that's a very important point. One of the things that I'm struggling with as you're speaking, and this doesn't answer the problem, it only makes the problem stronger. I know that Harav Soloveitchik Zatzal was very clear in multiple places saying that when people think that religion is there to make you a happier person, they're mistaken. I realize that has to be an assumption, and also Rav Soloveitchik isn't the only opinion. But even recently, I was reading a an essay that he wrote called Kodesh V'chol, Secular, Sacred, and Profane. And in that essay, he talks again about people who think that religion is there to solve life's problems, to make you more satisfied, have it backwards. Religion is there to make life more difficult, more meaningful, but not necessarily happier in the way that we normally think about it. So I don't know if you want to just quickly address that disconnect.
No, no. First of all, I want to, I'm very happy that you raised it. Well, first of all, just let's start from this week's portion and from next week's portion. I think the Torah says very clearly, I don't want to say that Rabbi Soloveitchik is wrong, because he's not wrong, completely wrong, but he's wrong. The Torah says that if you will observe the rules of the Torah, we will have a happy life, a good life. Leman tichyeh v'yarashta et haaretz. And the Torah says, "Natati lecha chukim tovim." The Torah mentions maybe in 8 places in the portions of Va'etchanan, Ekev, Re'eh, that the recipe for good and happy and good life is to observe Torah. So it seems to be that he's wrong. No, he's not wrong. Soloveitchik is right in that aspect, that of course religion will not make you always happy, because it will make time sometimes difficult, because to observe Shabbat and not to open the air condition when you have forgotten to do that, doesn't make you happy. And if you don't have kosher food, then you have to starve a bit and to struggle and not eating what you like to eat, and to taste the ice cream which is not kosher, or to eat meat that is not kosher. Of course, in that sense is absolutely right. Torah does not mean that you always have easy and tasty life. That's true. But once the Torah guarantees that you'll have a meaningful life, and that's no question, first of all, because you obey to God's will, and second of all, because obeying to his commands will create a more life, a more meaningful life. This has to be shown on the ground. And that's exactly the point that I raised in the first place. People look for 2 things. A, to live quality, better life, meaningful life, that's moral life. B, happy and lucky life. Now, if they don't see in the religious life both of the issues, they don't feel more moral and they don't feel more happy, that causes a problem. Now, you could still argue and say, and that's what Rav Soloveitchik would say, and I fully agree with him, that we are committed to God by the covenant that our ancestors signed almost 3,500 years ago in Sinai, and he's absolutely right. We are committed to that. That doesn't mean that we'll not struggle with that. And I would like to compare this with the marriage commitment obligations that basically, of course, are a recipe for happy, moral, and a meaningful life. But once people will feel that their life with the spouses does not make them happy, does not make them more moral, does not make them more living more meaningful life, so they're still committed by the covenant that they've signed 10, 20, 30 years ago. But if they don't find any meaningful content in that, they will break this covenant.
If I could just add one point, Rav Stav, one thing which I'd like to say in addition, which might be one of the key points, at least in English, I think people often confuse the words happy and fun. And what I mean by that is that keeping our life of halacha in some ways at times is less fun. You can't eat the ice cream. You can't turn on the air conditioning on Shabbat when it's 100 degrees outside. It's less fun. But happiness, what we call in Hebrew simcha, a deep sense of meaning and satisfaction of doing something important, that is certainly true. the way a friend of mine once explained it, having children or having little babies in some ways is less fun, but it's much happier in the sense
No
that
doubt.
you have less time to go out clubbing with your friends. But in terms of what it does for you, it makes you a happier person. Do you think that's a fair distinction?
Absolutely. The truth is that when I gave this speech in English a few weeks ago, when we're discussing it in the conference of Tzohar, I asked one of my colleagues, an English speaking from Bonn, I asked him, please give me the literal translation to the word me'ushar, osher. And the best word he could find for me was happy. The truth is that I was looking for another word because happy, even happiness does forget fun. Even happiness does not express the right terminology in Hebrew for the word meushar. When you have children, you are meushar. It's not about happiness. It's about being meushar. I don't know what's the word in English.
Right.
So maybe you could help me out with that.
I'm not sure either. I've always wondered about the word Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha. I once had a Rosh Yeshiva who said, how do you translate this? It's not so simple to find that. In English, maybe we don't have those same distinctions. If I want to get really parochial, I could even say, they say famously, the people who live up in snowy climates have more words for snow. Perhaps the Jewish people, Sason, Simcha, Gila, Rina, Disa, Chedva, we have so many words for happiness because that's part of our mahut, maybe part of the way we think.
Yeah,
And in
but
English, it
since
just
we
doesn't translate.
right, but you're so right. Ashrei Yoshvei Betecha. Ashrei comes from the word meushar, right? Now, what is the translation to the word meushar? I don't really know, but I think that it expresses not. It's not the moral. It's something that goes into all parts of your body, all parts of your soul, that you feel that you are really arrived to the right place, you feel at home, you feel so happy. I don't know what's the okay.
I
Anyway,
understand. Can I ask a question, though, Rav Stav? Moving back to our
go
main
ahead.
topic today, describing the problem as people feel that halacha does not necessarily make you more moral or give you a happier life. At the same time, and I have not looked at surveys, so this may not be necessarily true. It seems that the problem is a bigger problem, anecdotally from my own looking around, in the Dati Leumi community rather than in the Haredi community. I don't think Haredi children have the same problem with halacha, at least on the surface, as people, or at least a lot of people, in the national religious world. Why would that be a bigger problem in the modern Orthodox or Dati Leumi world?
For three reasons. A, the Dati Leumi people are raised to choose. They choose from day one, versus the Haredi society that is not raised to is not educated to choose. So that's number one. Number two, the interaction of the modern Orthodox society with secular society. What we are exposed to from day one, they are not exposed until the age of 20 or 21 or 25. So that's number two. And number three, and I think that's maybe the most important thing, we educate to learn the good things from each group. And we are educating that there are good things in every tribe in the Jewish society and even in the world. We have to learn the good from it. While we are learning good things from different people, we might be influenced as well. And number four, the religious education in the Haredi world is basically built on fear from punishment, reward and punishment, not only in this world, but primarily in the next world, in Olam Haba. In the religious education of the modern Orthodox, and I completely in favor of that, we do not emphasize the Olam Haba. We want to educate people to observe mitzvot because this is what we have received from Hashem. This is our covenant with Hashem, and this will make us live a better life, a meaningful life, and a moral life. So if these are the reasons, that's the result. Now, I want to add something. The percentage of drop-off in the Haredi world is big. They are not official numbers. We don't have the official numbers, but at least between 20 to 30%, according to all people that understand in these materials. Many of them live hidden life as secular and pretend to be Haredim, but are not. By us to take the decision and to decide to choose a side and to leave what we call to go off the derech and to become secular is something which is legitimate in the society. You don't feel outsider, you don't feel stranger, you don't feel a traitor. Okay, you took a decision, we respect you, and all the rabbis, including myself, will encourage the people, the parents, don't don't disengage yourself from your kids, invite them for Shabbos meals, don't give up. B'ezrat Hashem, if they're not observant now, they might come back in 10 years, in 20 years. They might send their children to religious education. Don't give up. And until 120, you are not released from your command to educate your children. In the Haredi world, it's different. Once you went out, or you went off the derech, you disengage yourself from the family completely. It's a much more dangerous decision for the one that wants to take this decision, and it's quite difficult for him.
Okay, that's a very interesting answer. So we've talked a lot about where the problem comes from. Do you think at all, Rav Stav, that the way halacha is taught in schools contributes to the problem? Sometimes I think people feel that we focus so much on details and small, minute details of halacha, which of course is the way halacha works. That's how it is. But people are often looking, I feel, for meaning, spiritual relevance, feeling that ruchniut, that connection to Hashem. And even though for people who may be more used to the halachic system, they feel you can find it in those details. Many people in the modern Orthodox world might feel this is ridiculous. How does this get me closer to God? Do you think that's true?
I don't want to judge and to criticize the system because I don't really know, to be honest, how the halacha is taught today. But I would put a finger on maybe on a different point. I think that what happens in the most of the Hesder yeshivot and most of the high schools that we try to follow the Lithuanian approach to Torah studies in Europe, and we wanted to copy the same way here, and it does not fit to the state of Israel. By the way, including Rabbi Lichtenstein, Zatzal, that I admired him and I learned by him. Um, uh, and he insisted that we have to learn in Har Etzion just like we learn in Polyverge and Hebron. And the truth is that I disagreed with him then, and I disagree with him now. I think that Torah has to be taught, first of all, with much more relevancy, much more attention to spiritual approaches inside the Gemara and not only to the halachic details. And as a matter of fact, when I see today chabures, sermons that Haredi rabbis give on different topics, and I see the same topic, the shir that is given by Zionist Rosh Yeshivot, I could easily analyze and distinguish between them. Those who take a question of a Rashba and giving two answers and two distinctions between Tosfot and Rashba on a specific point that almost make no difference for nobody, and to see the rabbis that have a broader approach and say, let's start with what is the source in the Torah, in which part of the Torah does this belong to connect the details to something which give a much broader picture. I think that Torah studies should focus on much more theological issues, spiritual issues, and point B, which is not less important, when you talk about halakhi issues, you should connect them and engage them to the spiritual sources of these issues, which is quite easy to do, and sometimes we forget to do that.
I'll just add, Rav Stav, that I was learning Hilchot Tzniut, the laws of modesty, for lack of a better term, with my almost 16-year-old daughter who's going into 10th grade. And we looked around at several books and we used your book in the end, Avo Beitecha, which you wrote with your son. It's a book which has numerous topics. And one of the topics that we looked at in depth was your presentation of skirts versus pants and other issues. And one of the aspects of the book, which I found extremely refreshing and was very helpful for my daughter as well, was that too often I find that some halacha books fall back into, well, are pants asur? This is an example. And it's almost like, of course they are, as opposed to let's talk about it and really look at it and forget what society seems to say. That if you wear skirts, you're more frum, quote unquote, than if you wear pants, tsanua pants. And that might be true, that might not be true. But I found your book was very refreshing in the sense that it looked at it honestly and said, let's look at all the sources. Let's go back and try to understand better each aspect of it. And if we have to set a policy, what is the halachic policy that makes the most sense based on the halacha, as opposed to based on what society tells us we have to believe? So I'm not trying to flatter you. I just said it happened to be an extremely good example of a halachic approach, which was not doctrinaire, which was not stuck, which says, let's look at it honestly. And I know my daughter was very happy to read such a thing as well.
I'll tell you, without referring to that, thank you so much for the compliment. But I would say the following. I think that we didn't refer to this at all in this conversation. And I think it's something, since you mentioned it, I want to make a comment about that. I will start with something that I will be quite cynical, with your permission. There was a psak a few weeks ago that it's forbidden to eat shunt on Thursday night.
Right. I
I'm
heard
not.
about that.
Why? Because it's food. It's a product that usually is used for Shabbos, so it's not kvod Shabbos. Later on, he said no. He returned from that psak. A few years ago, one of the very famous rabbis in Bnei Brak gave a psak that whoever who has a cellular phone is posol eidus.
Right. I mean, someone who has a cell phone cannot be a witness in halachic testimony.
Right. It could not be a witness in a marriage, in a Jewish marriage. So I said to myself, I have a solution to all the problems of mamzerim and to all the problems of those who refuse to give get, because most probably the Eidim, the witnesses, were holding such a cellular phone, and most probably we could cancel the validity of all the marriages in Israel, including Bnei Brak. Now, what bothers me with these two examples? These two examples are extreme, but actually they are examples for a phenomenon. And the phenomena is that rabbis sometimes take courage and to make up halachot, and the students don't distinguish between what is halachot and what are regulations or halachot that you have to put a smiley near them, because actually they are not halachot. They are just recommendations, which could be good recommendations, but have nothing to do with halacha. And I believe that one of the issues that is a big source of problem to our kids is the lack of trust that they have in the rabbis. They cannot distinguish already between halachot that are really halachot and between policies, recommendations, because the rabbis do not try to clarify what is halacha and what is just a recommendation. And once they color everything with the color of halacha, so then the boy or the girl say to themselves, we have no patience for these rabbis. I mean, they prohibit everything. Why should we follow what they tell us to do if we know that they are not serious? I mean, okay, shunt on Thursday night, what's going on here, etc., etc.
The truth is, Chazal did the same thing, and I'm not Chas Hashem criticizing Chazal. I mean, this is a tradition. For example, when our sages say in the Talmud that lashon hara, that slander or evil speech, is on the same level as murder and sexual misdeeds and idolatry, that wasn't meant to be taken literally, that if you speak Lashon Hara, you should be put to death like an idolater or like a murderer. It's an idea, it's an expression of this is a very serious thing. And I think people often fail to understand the difference between what is meant literally and what is meant as a way of making a point, which I think is what comes down to the idea of not having chulent on Thursday night or not having a cell phone. It might be wonderful recommendations, but when we stop forgetting about the nuance that this wasn't meant literally your pasula edut, or if you meant it, your pasula edut, that's a different problem. But it's not meant literally, it's nisur. It's a prohibition on eating cholent on Thursday night, as opposed to trying to emphasize the importance of Shabbos. We forget the
That's
nuance.
interesting. It's an interesting point what you say. I'm not sure the idea that you said is right. I'm not sure that the example is correct because when the rabbis are comparing Lashon Hara with Avodah Zarah and Gilui, adultery, etc., they never dared to say that the punishment is the same. They wanted to say that the sin has the same strictness or the same importance. I would use another example to use what you said. There is a Gemara that says, "Asur la'adam sheimale piv schok ba'olam hazeh." It's forbidden to fill your mouth with smile. Is this prohibited? Is this asur? Is it really asur? Of course, it's not asur. It's just a kind of recommendation. That's a good example
Okay,
because
I hear that. I,
they use the word asur, and when they really didn't mean to say the word asur, it's not asur. It's recommended not to laugh too much because we are in the time of destruction. But anyway, when this rabbi said that the apostle Eidut, he meant it. He paskened halacha. I believe that he didn't really mean it, but at least publicly he said that we should not use them as edim, and etc. etc.
I think people, and this really isn't our topic, but it's still fascinating. People often don't understand that nuance. Just one more example, which is important because it does relate to how people understand what rabbinic authority is. I don't want to quote this incorrectly, but at least technically speaking, I was told that Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal said the following thing. Al pi halacha, someone who has sexual intercourse with someone who's in nida, that's chayav karet. It's a very serious infraction. Whereas a person who sleeps with a non-Jew, a Jew who sleeps with a non-Jew, is a lesser infraction on the scale of values in terms of the punishment. So the question was asked to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky as I heard the story. So therefore, if a person isn't going to keep hilchot nida, isn't it better if he marries a non-Jew? And the answer is, of course not. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. Sometimes we fail to understand how things work. Technically, you say, hey, this is as bad as this is worse than that. We miss the point. It's almost missing the forest for the trees, as they say. You see the details, but you don't see the larger picture. Of course, it's not better to marry a non-Jew. That's a far worse situation, even though the punishment is actually much less.
That's amazing. First of all, if you don't mind, I want to talk about
Please.
this example because I use it in many shiurim. I didn't know the story of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky,
I hope I'm getting it right, so I don't want to necessarily quote him if he never said that, but that's what I was told.
but I could tell you that I take this as an example, as a question to justify one of the biggest projects of Tzohar, which is the marriage for secular people in Israel. And the question that I always raised in the beginning is, why do we want the secular people to get married halachically? Wouldn't it be better that they will not marry halachically and they will stay not married? And then, the maximum is, according to the Rambam, it's a prohibition of prostitution. But according to Ramban and many other rabbis, it's allowed halachically. So they don't have chuppah v'kiddushin, but we prevent them from mamzerim, we prevent them from adultery, etc., etc. So why did the rabbinate, and why do we want to encourage so many people? And I always use this example of getting married to a non-Jewish versus getting married to a woman that will not keep the rules of nida. And because we have to understand. And that comes back to the beginning of our discussion, that eventually Torah is not mathematics of punishments and not mathematics of prohibitions. Basically, Torah is a system of rules that is given to whoever wants to be a part of this nation. If somebody wants to marry out, actually, he declares that he is showing his back to his people. So that's the worst thing. The Torah does not have words to deal with him because he's already gone. So of course it would be 10 times better to marry a non-observant Jew rather than to marry a Gentile. That's not a question. The same thing, of course, that halachically, mathematically speaking, we would avoid him from different prohibitions if he would not be married. But the Torah wants you to create a covenant of sanctity, a covenant of family. Of course, that's the platform, that's the basic. I think these are two examples of where Torah should be taught in a way that people will feel that we are a part of a story. And you know, in the end of the day, every Jewish modern Orthodox has to ask himself, what is his story? What is his personal story? What is his Jewish story? And these are examples of the story that we need to tell.
Okay. And that leads us, Rav Stav, into some practical ways of dealing with the issue that we're talking about today, the disenfranchisement of too many young people from the halachic system. How do we enable them to feel part of that story such that it translates into halachic practice in the way that we would approve of, that we think is acceptable for a religious Jew? What are some of the practical things we can do?
First of all, never give up. Never give up, meaning I'm not coercing on you, nothing. I have trust in you. But it doesn't mean that I don't have my opinions. That means the following. A, I respect your decisions. B, you know what I am. You know what we stand for. And on one hand, we embrace you. We help you. Well, parents, we are not neglecting you, and we are not leaving you just because you have decided something to behave or to observe in a different way. I have a story that I love to share. It's on YouTube. You could watch, and how Rav Steinman and Rav Edelstein, both of them, these two big Haredi rabbis, are asked by the students, if a father, his daughter is dressing not in a modest way, should the father and the mother buy her clothes that are not al pi halacha, that are not fitting to the halachic code? And the answer that he gives is no doubt, of course. Your wife should go with your daughter to buy for her the clothes, and she would pay for that. Your wife should pay for that. And he's asking, isn't this an assistance to a Dvar Avera? And he says, no assistance, no assistance. And he doesn't give an answer, but the explanation is very simple. If he doesn't know what you think, and he thinks that you are helping him to do the Averot, and you are supporting him, that's assistance Ledvar. But if you know, he knows exactly that you are against it. He knows exactly that he doesn't like what you do. But he treats you as a father or as a mother treats his daughter or treats her daughter. So then it's only a question of the natural relationship between parents. So A, we should continue to be the parents. B, that means in early ages that we should try to show our kids what is important for us. In many cases, and that's what we found out, it's found out in surveys, and we see it in real life. Many times, the reason why kids don't really respect certain strictness in mitzvot is because they saw that the parents do not take it seriously. You know, there is a survey that was done among youngsters that went off the derech in Judea and Samaria. And the survey came up with amazing results. most of the kids that went off the derech continued, followed the way of the parents in being very, very right-wingers in the settlements of Judea and Samaria.
Politically.
Politically, right. Which means that they were not rebelling in the parents. They were just seeing what was really important for the parents, and what was perceived by them as less important for the parents was translated by them to be less important. I'm not blaming, God forbid, the parents. I'm not saying, but that's the way it was perceived by the children, which means that if we want to educate our children and to engage them more and more to Torah and Mitzvot, we have to be first and foremost a role model for them. If they see us looking for a kosher place to eat and we do not make any compromises on kashrut when we are in trip in Europe, they will be educated to observe kashrut. And if they see that we are strict in going to daven in Mincha Mariv, they will try to do it as well. And when they see that something is not important for us, most probably it will be less important for them.
That's very interesting, and I certainly agree with that. A lot of this is about off the derech, but how about what I'm thinking is our main topic, which is kids who are not off the derech. These are kids who see themselves as religious kids. They just don't seem to care about that aspect as much. Sanut is an easy example. In some ways, it's a cheap example because there's so much debate about what it means. But the idea of kids who don't dress as sanua as their parents, they're not trying to rebel. And it's not that the parents aren't setting an example. They're actually setting a very good example very often, and the kids just don't care. Now, again, I don't love that example because I think there's so much emphasis on it. It probably is a turnoff for a lot of people. But how about situations where just the kids, they're not rebelling, they identify with the community. As you said, they're still right-wing politically, and it could be they say, yes, I'm a religious Zionist Jew, but they just don't take halacha as seriously, even though the parents do set a good example. How about that? How can we try to show them that this is the source of meaning and happiness, as you started off saying?
Right. So it's very important, and I would like to emphasize 2 points on that. I would start with Snoot, although I hate this topic, although I wrote a book about
You
that,
wrote a book
but
about
I
it.
hate the topic. I think that first and foremost, we should understand that the challenges that our kids are confronting with are very difficult in this area, and we should not make this the biggest principle of Judaism. And sometimes I could hear parents will say, well, I would prefer my daughter to daven less and to wear a more modest dress than, and she prefers to do the opposite. You don't choose for her the mitzvot that she will observe more. And if she davens and she loves davening and she's not dressing herself in a proper way, okay. I'm not saying it's good, but strengthen the right things that you're doing. Don't undermine it. Don't judge it. I remember myself telling my son wanted once, my eldest son wanted to buy a tzitzit tchelet and color into blue. And I said to him, maybe let's start with having a haircut, because that time he had long hair, before you buy tchelet. And I remember the lesson he gave me. Who told you what's prioritized by God? Who told you that this is better than that? This is more important than that. And the truth is that he's right. I don't know what God prefers more. So we should encourage the points of strength that we see in our children, and not undermine what the weaknesses. By the way, it's in general we have to strengthen the strong points, that the strength that we have, not dealing only with the weaknesses. That's one thing. Second thing, we should not talk about things that make our kids nervous and crazy and fighting. because they are in a time that's their way to rebel, although we do not define this as an absolute rebel. And three, I would recommend, if you think that this is an issue that eventually has to be discussed, it should not be discussed in public, because then the kid has to find himself to defend himself. He might find himself offended. You can talk to him about this privately once. You cannot talk about these issues 10 times. It would not work. And after once or twice, he understands exactly what you think about it. And let me tell you something. Most of our kids know exactly what we think about the way they dress, about the fact that they get up late in the morning, let's say Shabbos morning, and they learn Krishma 2 hours after the time. Trust me, they know exactly what we think about it. We could wake him once. We could tell them once, look, that's the time. Don't debate it. Don't fight with him. It has no, it's useless.
And Rav Stav, what do you think the role of rabbinic leadership is in order to help facilitate this? You're talking about the role of parents, which obviously is the front line of defense. I sometimes wonder if young people are disappointed in leadership. They don't see leadership that really represents them so much. Perhaps that's not true for many people, but I think for some, they feel a bit disenfranchised from the leadership. What can rabbis, Rabbaniyot, other people in places of rabbinic leadership do to help show them that we think that halacha is important and convince them, therefore, that they should have a stronger connection to Jewish law?
I think that I'll take just the example that I've given 2 minutes ago about davening, getting up late. Few rabbis during the years asked me, is it recommended to make a minyan in the vocation, to make a minyan at 10 o'clock in the morning, which is after Zman Kriyat Shema? But there is a big chance that students will get up to that minyan. And otherwise, they would not they would definitely not daven in minyan. Maybe they would even forget to daven at all. And I said, yes, it's your responsibility. Although this minyan is officially not a proper minyan, because they say Kriyat Shema after the Zman. But what is the alternative? And I think that's an example. Rabbis have to find their congregants, and each congregation has its own challenges, where the rabbi should find the opportunity to engage himself to the challenges that the youngster deal with. I gave an example of davening. It could be an example of trips during the 9 days or the 3 weeks, or other places where the final question will be, what do you want the rabbi? Do you want to treat your students as they are now in the highest quality of Yeshivat Ponovich, or you understand that you are dealing with boys and girls that are challenged by the very fundamental issues of halacha? They want to be observant, but they find it difficult. What ways could you pave to find the way to them in order to engage them? If it's creating meetings at night to discuss, to sing, to learn something, any way of connection that comes by their own will is 10 times more important than something that you impose on them as a part of school or as a part of the family.
Okay, I think that's so important. And we're almost out of time, but I have one final question I'd like to ask you on that same topic. And it's about the question of compromise when it comes to halacha. There's a story which I've quoted many times where a Reform rabbi, he writes this himself in his book, Nine and a Half Mystics, Herbert Weiner, went in the 1960s, I believe, to visit with the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zatzal. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said the difference between us and you is not that you compromise and we don't compromise. We, meaning the Orthodox world, also compromise, but we don't sanctify the compromise. In other words, as opposed to saying that it's too hard not to drive on Shabbos, fine, you can drive on Shabbos. It's mutar. We say, okay, you can't not drive on Shabbat. How about we try again next year? which is a very different situation. How do we make sure then, Rav Stav, when we're teaching our children, okay, we're going to have that 10 o'clock minyan, we're going to have a late minyan, we're going to let you do things which are not fully in accord with what halacha demands, to teach them that that is obviously good and you should do it as much as you can without saying that's the best you could possibly be. This compromise is mutar in the classic sense, meaning it's okay to say Kriya Shema after the time. How do we make sure that they learn that halacha has demands while at the same time being flexible enough that we can say you're allowed to compromise without pretending that that is actually the ideal situation?
I fully agree with the definition that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. Actually, the Lubavitcher Shlichim all over the world implement this policy. I mean, the idea of making a minyan at 10 o'clock is a Chabad idea. It's not something that I made up. And, when I see Shlichim of Chabad in so many places, what compromises they make, in what parties they invite people to come on Purim, when they know that there will be sometimes even mixed dancing and whatever they do in order to reach out to people. And now there is nobody in the area that thinks that the Chabad thinks that mixed marriages are encouraged or are permitted. I think the time arrived that we should understand that each one of our kids is in potential to be secular. And we should treat him as we treat a secular guy that we want to convince him to be frum. And we take him as a frum guy, we take it for granted, and we think that, okay, we can raise the demands and we should demand the maximum. And let's do the other way around. Let's pretend that we think that he's secular, and now we want to encourage him to become frum. And I promise you that if every father would treat his son as he would have treated the neighbor's son that is secular, that he wants to convince him to become frum, I'm almost positive that he would have treated him in a different way. The entire environment, the entire atmosphere of the family would have been completely different. So I recommend you, please treat your children as you treat your neighbor's children that are now secular, and you have the mission to make them frum. Actually, that's the situation. You have kids. Hashem has gifted us with kids. They are now have 50% chance to be secular within 10 years. That's more or less the percentage, maybe 40%. That's more or less the percentage in the modern Orthodox society. Now you have given the chance to convince him to become frum. Do whatever you do. Do whatever you would have done with a neighbor in order to convince him to become frum.
A very important point. I think I can add to that. Our kids are smarter than we sometimes give them credit for. They know when a compromise is actually the normative halacha. When you daven at 10 o'clock, they realize, really, I probably should daven earlier, but I appreciate the fact that they're not pushing me and making me feel guilty for davening at 10 o'clock, and that they're happy that I'm davening at 10 o'clock rather than not at all. Rav Stav, this has been fascinating and important and a joy. So I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shalom, shalom, b'sorot tovot.